Well, welcome to Film Life 101 Part 3. First thing I want to do is take you back to the film number 1 and remind you about the process I described, which we all go through, that's the caregivers when we are babies and young children and as we're growing up. Their job is to help us to understand the world, and in so doing they load us up with all sorts of views and ideas, many of which are essential for our well-being, such as don't touch something, it burns, all these really basic things to protect us in our survival. And then they also produce a load of their own information, which is their own hang-ups, which they then load onto us as well. So by the time the person reaches adulthood, they've got this foreign installation, and I talked about it in terms of, first of all, this image of perfection that we're all led to believe that we need to adhere to. So we have the situation that we're all being put into a position where we are supposed to be something and someone other than who we really are. That's the image of perfection, and how that goes into the detail where the person compiles their own book of law about what they should and shouldn't be doing and what is right and what is wrong, which then leads to the ability to form this judging nature, which is where we judge other people very harshly and engage in gossip and end up perhaps being the sternest judges to ourselves rather than to other people. And I deliberately left the fourth facet out of that description of our domestication process, which is so well known by the Toltec shamans. And the one that I've left off deliberately is the victim. And the victim consciousness is something that we all get exposed to and we all take on in different ways. And this is what I want to explain, is that this domestication process is creating this foreign installation, which we call the ego, the rational mind, the monkey mind, the chattering mind, the internal dialogue, so many ways to describe this particular quality. And an aspect of the ego is the ego has a very strong desire for survival at all costs. And the reason for this is because it is a foreign installation. It's not like you and your soul. You and your soul are permanent. You are forever. You have nothing to fear. But the ego has a lot to fear. The ego is created by the character and the personality in this lifetime and persists for this lifetime only. So there's certain experiences we can undergo, near-death experiences, strong out-of-body experiences, and experiences particularly with plant spirits and with chemical drugs. And these can cause the ego to be in a situation where it fears for its existence. And so this is what I want to go into. I want to go into the nature of the fear and the nature of the victim. And the victim is an aspect of life which is one that can rule us with an iron hand. And it can be very, very difficult. And what tends to happen is a person gets into any situation where the ego gets threatened and they go into victim mode. And I can remember one particular person that I was very close in a relationship with for some time. And there were times when I would go into victim mode and it used to drive this person up the wall. She couldn't stand it. And of course this is because I was reflecting an aspect of her own nature which she wasn't very happy about looking at. So we all have this victim as part of our makeup. This is part of the foreign installation, which is not actually really you. And what the victim does is the victim goes into a place of fear. So let's look about fear. Let's go into a little bit of detail about fear. And I've got great gratitude to a writer called Jerry Jampolsky. And he wrote a book way back in the 1970s, and the title of the book tells you pretty much all you need to know, because it's called Love is Letting Go of Fear. And that's actually his definition of love in the book. It's a wonderful book, and it goes into great detail to explain the way this works. And what I particularly love is this image on the front cover, which you can see, where all these people are on the big boat having a really great time, having a party. And there's this little person in the foreground in the little boat that's being let go of, and that's the fear that's being let go of. So fear is something that can rule all of our lives. And many of us will have attracted experiences of suffering, particularly in childhood, because you have a situation that every child experiences, which is really quite horrific, that these huge beings that are adults have got the power over the child in terms of day-to-day existence, what is and what is not allowed, things you get chastised for, things you get punished for. And the child can literally spend a lot of the time in fear, and this does indeed, in many of us, put us into adulthood. And then there comes this moment when we experience true love, and this becomes for all of us an opportunity. And when we are in a state of true love, or in loveness, it's wonderful. And the reason why we're so attracted to that state is because when a person is truly in love, they feel untouchable, they feel nothing can harm them. And they say a wonderful expression, all the world loves a lover, because that person's consciousness has become so positive and outgoing and open-hearted, they tend to attract really a whole succession of positive experiences into their lives. And that gets severely contrasted with those many experiences of fear which they had as a child. Because as a child we are all literally under the authority of adults that control our every move. And this is something that we all carry as a wound, that we'd had so much of our lives when we did not have any control over what was going on. So it's quite a big issue for all of us. So the journey of the victim is where we experience having other people with power over us and feeling disempowered. And this leads to a state of fear, because we're literally out of control so many times, especially when we have an adult that is ranting and raving in a state of great anger, and possibly punishing us and possibly physically attacking us. This is something that most of us have experienced in our lives. So the victim is a really deep state that we all know about. And then along comes a knight in shining armour, literally charging into the picture. And I want to give a huge thank you now to David Icke. And there's one book title from David Icke which I would recommend unreservedly to anyone. And the title is as follows: Infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is illusion. Now, David Icke didn't come up with this overnight. This is something it took him a long time to come up with. And in fact, it wasn't until he went to South America and had his experiences with the plant spirits, which we now know of as ayahuasca, that he went through perhaps his most major life transformations. And it was through drinking ayahuasca out in South America that enabled him to see for the first time, and to really put in perspective a lot of his writings in his earlier books, that actually when it comes down to it, it is so easy, because we've all got an ego, to get sucked into fear states. And his realization, which I feel immense gratitude for, is it relates to this concept of the matrix. And the matrix is this idea of an artificial construct which is very much ruled by the ego of all of us. And it's this construct which tells us how to live our lives according to the image of perfection, the book of the law, the judge, and victim consciousness. And victim consciousness in many ways is all about the words I can't, or I shouldn't, or I mustn't, or I won't, or I'm scared of because of what will happen. And along comes David Icke with this extraordinary book title. Let's just say it again. Infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is illusion. Now, those people who've had experiences with really powerful plant spirits know this one. And I personally have great gratitude to the plant spirits, Salva Divinorum. I spent 1 year with 5 experiences with this particular plant spirit. And what happened in each occasion is my awareness of consensus reality evaporated into nothingness, and I became aware of what actually is going on, which actually makes our world, what actually constructs this beautiful, wonderful nature, which is, of course, the basis upon which the matrix has been constructed, with all the machines and technologies and screens which dominate the lives of so many of us now. So this is literally what's happened over the time. So back to his title, Infinite Love is the Only Truth, Everything Else is Illusion. What I realised when I came back from each of these experiences with Salva Divinorum, that I'd literally lost my ability to think a single thought. Now this, in a sense, is actually a definition of ego death, because ego is so related to being able to think. When you stop thinking, that's it, ego death. And one of the things all of us know who've experienced ego death, whether it's from near-death experiences or from plant spirits or from chemical drugs, those of us who had an experience of ego death know that once the experience ends, what happens is the ego comes back stronger than ever. Now, because you're an infinite, enduring soul, you can remind your ego of this wonderful fact that any experience which appears to threaten ego's livelihood only makes ego come back stronger. Once you know this, once you really grasp this, this is the beginning of the ultimate letting go of fear. Because this is the situation, this is your reality. Here we are, Life 101 Part 3, your reality is you are a soul of infinite duration. You've experienced, most of you, many lifetimes on this earth. Many of you have experienced lifetimes on other planets in other dimensions. And yes, guess what? Every single time that you go to sleep and you dream, you are travelling multidimensionally. Now this is a massive reassurance, because it makes you realise that anything that you might be frightened of has got so little really long-term impact. Now let's take the ultimate situation. Here's a person pointing a gun at your head. This is the ultimate threat to your existence. And actually what is being threatened, ultimately, in the worst case scenario, what is being threatened is your temporary existence in this borrowed physical body on this planet. And you all know that when you leave this planet, you become a fully operating multidimensional being, able to travel in all dimensions. You are an infinite soul of infinite duration. So ultimately, when it comes right down to it, there is really nothing to fear. Okay, well, let's take it further, because I can think of a situation more fearful than the person having the gun pointed to their head. And that's a person who's got a chronic severe illness with a negative outcome. Perhaps this is the greatest fear that all human beings experience. And I'm very, very grateful to Anne Napier, who has had a regular column. She now has a sporadic column in the magazine The Cygnus Review. Cygnus Review is a monthly magazine for the Cygnus book publishing company. They are a wonderful company. I strongly recommend them if you're interested in any alternative books whatsoever. Many of the titles I've mentioned are actually on their book list. They're really a great company. Now, she has been having a relationship with cancer for some years now, and she's shared with incredible honesty. And what she comes up with time and time again is, no matter how ill I am, what I can do is I can look out of the window and I can look at nature, and I can take in the flowers in my home, and I can take in the plants, the trees outside. And by stepping into the present moment, as Eckhart Tolle has reminded us to do many, many times in his book, The Power of Now, also a highly recommended book, what these people, these wise people, are telling us is whatever is going on, there's always something to connect to appreciate, which brings us back to the attitude of gratitude in film number 1 of the Health and Vitality series. So this takes us to the realization that, as people have been saying since the 1970s, you create your own reality. And there's a thought for a person who's stuck in victim consciousness. I've spent much of my life embedded and enmeshed in victim consciousness due to experience of suffering in the past. And this was such a big one to realize, actually, we create all our own reality. And by being much more centered in the present moment, having this attitude of enjoying what is and feeling ready to move on to whatever's going to come next, this really is liberating, and it's freeing, and it enables you to find more opportunities to enjoy, which means more opportunities for happiness. And that's really something that matters to a lot of people. So how do you experience more happiness in your life? Answer: by being tuned into the present moment, lots of time in nature, tuned into the illusory nature of fear and suffering, and tuned into the internal nature of love, and gratitude for whatever it is you can be thankful for. So these are our gifts, and these gifts remind us that we are infinitely enduring. And even the ego, which can become so frightened, actually every time there's a serious event, only comes back all the stronger. So this is really reminding us and asking us to let go of our fears and step into the present moment. And for the single exception of the gun being pointed at the person's head, every other situation, you tend to find that these fears that the ego might generate are not really about the present moment. And we're not about the present moment, and thus gives us the opportunity to relax into being who we are. And so let me say for the third time the wonderful words of David Icke's book, which is, infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is illusion. As William Shakespeare said in his play, all the world's a stage and we are but players on it. If we take this more light-hearted approach, this more fun approach to our daily existence, to living in the moment, this really releases us from the fears. and take every opportunity you can to have a party. Now, your vision of the party might be going out with loads of people and drinking and having a good time, or your idea of a party might be much more flexible. Sometimes my idea of a party is coming out into nature and being on my own in a field, enjoying the sun on my face and looking at the beautiful buttercups around me. So this is my message to you via all these people I've mentioned, that fundamentally what you are being invited to do is to enjoy the present moment as much as you possibly can. Connect with nature every opportunity you get, and realise that actually infinite love is where it's at. It's the beginning and the end and beyond of our existence, because ultimately we are endless infinite souls with enormous capacity for love. This is what we came here to learn, is through having experiences of difficulty, challenge, victimhood, oppression, suffering, to actually grasp the love in the present moment whenever it arises. So thank you very much for watching. Remember to enjoy the love in your life, enjoy nature, enjoy other human beings, and take everything with a light-hearted attitude. Enjoy. Thank you.